Welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. This is the HR Tech series. I'm joined today by Siobhan Kelly, live from Dublin. How are you?
So good.
I went. I
Never
went
been
into my
better.
UFC. I went into my UFC voice there.
I know. I'm not really a UFC fan, so I don't get it. I didn't know what was happening to you, to be honest.
All right. So today's guest is Martin Burns. Who is he? What's he all about?
Oh, he's so many things. He is the editor in chief of Recruitment News Network.
Uh-huh.
He is the creator and admin, I think, of the Facebook page that you were so popular on, Talent Product Plays.
Yeah.
And
Let's
then
give a bit of context. If you haven't heard the last episode, I put out a post on the Highwaymen and changed some of the faces: Bill Berman, Craig Fisher, and Martin Burns and William Tincup, and it got a bit of heat and got a lot of
understatement.
anger, and we kind of went into a lot of that. So we're not going to go into it too much.
No.
And we had a bit of crack with Martin on the show about that, and yeah, fun times on that
He
one.
had some really interesting insights on it as well, though. But he's also, don't let me forget, the VP for strategic consulting with HireClick. So he's a big gun, all right.
All right, great stuff. We will cut straight over to the interview. All right, welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. I'm joined today by Martin Burns, and this is the HR Tech for Good season. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I am not bad. The
Good.
sun is shining here. We're still in lockdown, but the good stuff is on the horizon. You know, this time last year I was in Santa Barbara, and I was planning on moving there, and my business fell apart overnight. So it's been a big rebuilding exercise and kind of reinvention all year. I think a lot of us have done that, haven't we?
Oh, for sure. It was a good year for it, I guess. If you can find good from last year, it was a chance to kind of restart things and rebuild.
Where are you based, Martin?
So I live just north of Boston, Massachusetts, in the States, in a small little city called Newburyport.
Lovely. It's supposed to be one of the nicest places in the US to live in.
Yeah, that's the rumor, or we just buy placements. I'm not sure yet, but it's a good place to live. It is.
You from there?
No, grew up not far from Boston in the western suburbs. Moved here about 5 years ago with my family.
All right, very good. Okay, so before we jump into it, just give us a brief intro into your illustrious past.
It's so I'm always tempted to start off with the line from The Jerk, Steve Martin, but no, I came out of staffing, so I spent about 5-6 years placing actuaries of all things, which was, and that was back when we were still using foldable tricards, pen and paper.
Yeah.
Faxing was our technology. The internet was around, but they hadn't adapted to it yet. So it was a lot of cold calling and notes with pen and paper and sort of pounding the phone. So I grew up doing that, and that gave me a good foundation in how to handle candidates. It was a great environment for that. They were very candidate focused and client focused, and the goal with that agency was to make placements that lasted and placements that became managers and hired from you. So we wanted to place really qualified candidates with a lot of honor and integrity, which I thought was how staffing worked because I was naive and I was young. I left there, joined a different agency a few years later for a cup of coffee and realized that it was not like that typically. So kind of jumped from there into corporate where I built and ran the recruiting team for ZoomInfo. And back then ZoomInfo was kind of a darling technology of the recruiting industry. So it got me exposed to a lot of big names and players in the industry, which was exciting. Got to go to conferences.
That is, by the way.
What's that?
What an amazing product that is.
Yeah, it was, yeah, absolutely. And especially back then when LinkedIn was still in its infancy and social was kind of new and sourcing was developing. The tool was ahead of its time, frankly, I think, and the technology was bleeding edge, almost too much in some ways. They were looking to use a lot of AI technologies, semantic search, machine learning, NLP, and this is back in 2006, 2010 when I was there. So really early days for that kind of tech. The fact they made it work as well as it did was remarkable.
How
Yeah.
are they able in Europe? Like, we'd find some way to wreck that company with GDPR. How is there no laws in the US that make their life difficult?
Less laws by far.
Less laws.
Even before GDPR, the laws were looser in the States. Germany was always kind of the model that was the most extreme versus the US, which was a lot more lax about data privacy, things like that. We're not as Wild West as say Somalia, but
Yeah.
definitely a lot looser than Europe as far as data goes.
Speaking of the Wild West, when did you join the Highwaymen?
So, as an analogy, the Highwaymen, the super group country rock band, which we use the cover for some of the podcast members. What's fun is a tie-in. So Chris Christopherson is one of the Highwaymen, and he got his career start from Johnny Cash. He was more senior than he was, and Johnny Cash, he landed in a helicopter on Johnny Cash's lawn to show him for his first song.
Yeah.
Christopherson was a Rhodes Scholar, Army Ranger, helicopter pilot, this amazing human being, and then moved to Nashville, took a job as a janitor in a music studio to try and get well known. Anyways, flew with Mitch Johnny Cash through doing all that. And my backstory is I met William Tincup via Facebook. I like this picture. Yeah. We were connected, but through Zoom Info, we were connected through friends of friends kind of thing. So I just sent him a friend request one day, and then he put up a note saying, "Hey, I'll be in Boston. Who wants to meet?" So we met for a cup of tea, actually, because I think he was nursing a hangover, and a bite of food, and got along. And then
very sensible for some recruiters, eh?
Yeah, weird. So he, but he kind of then started turning me into speaking gigs and got me known that way. So my first speaking gig was major one was Tinker recommending me for the keynote panel at an spring ERE event, where it was myself, this schlub from Zoom Info, the small little company, with two Fortune TA leaders, well-known famous people, and me in the keynote panel. So I owe William. So William's kind of my Johnny Cash, I guess, in some ways. As far as
that's great. And for anybody who's listening, Martin runs an amazing Facebook group, which is basically the epicenter of HR tech, mixture of founders and I suppose the buyers of the HR tech.
Yep.
Just lots of people with strong opinions. And as we kind of enter this world and discover what it's about, when you're setting up a podcast, right, you go, who are the influencers and who are the CEOs? And that's kind of where you go at the start. And we've lined up like 50 guests. And to start, you get a few influencers. And usually they have an interesting story. And they're going to be able to perform because they speak publicly. So it sets a podcast off in a good tone. And I learned this through the other show that I run. And as I was recording with, I think it was William Tincup and Bill Berman and Craig Fisher, it kept coming up. Yeah, we know each other and he's my buddy and we spoke together for years and years and years. So I thought, how funny would that be? I'll put the four guys on a picture. I'll put it in the Facebook group. And then I had 48 hours of hatred. 48 hours of hatred, 3 different threads. And I take it all with a pinch of salt because I know that there is an issue in the industry there in terms of getting speaking slots. But what are your thoughts on it? Why do you think like that hits such a nerve?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. We're in the middle of a zeitgeist, and I think a good one, right? There's obviously systemic issues around race and gender, and not just in recruiting, but in general in business. You look at the number of Fortune CEOs, how many of them are not white men? It's you can count it on one hand, right? So it's fairly clear there are issues, right, that need to be addressed. And a lot of people are finding their voice and pushing back, saying, "No, I really think we need to fix this." And I agree. So you unfortunately kind of kicked a hornet's nest when you came in, and quite often it's with best intentions, but with sort of blinders on. And we all have blind spots as humans, right? And we don't sort of realize this may cause a problem because you knew the industry, you don't understand what sort of the nuances are and the backstory. But there is a history of a lot of the speakers who are invited to speak at events and on panels and whatnot are the same faces over and over again. And now you've got 4 middle-aged white men, and I'm calling myself middle-aged even though I don't feel it because I behave like a 12-year-old typically. But here I am at 50, and yeah, I've been engaged with the industry for since Zoom Info days. So 2006, when I really started meeting people up to now. So it's been 15 years, and everyone else in that group was already involved and engaged and was already a luminary when I started attending conferences and getting to know who was who and understanding what's happening. So these are well-known people, including myself, and they're all white guys. I mean, Tin
Well,
Cup is Native American,
and so
but it's perception,
yeah,
right?
the image looked like 4 white guys, even though they're not 4 white guys.
Yeah, and it looked like the same old faces, and if you understand the kind of the nuance of why you did it, because it's just because we happen to know each other and we're well known, and the Highwaymen was
around performing like the Highwaymen did.
Yeah, no, don't never ask me to sing, but the Highwaymen was a super group. It was 4 old friends who had been playing together for a long time. They got together, made a band. So that was the intention of your picture.
Yeah.
And I believe totally innocent, not trying to promote like, hey, look, it's once again, here's the patriarchy looming over the mountains looking at you. But from the perspective of someone who's not a white male, who's been kind of like, I want to get a speaking gig, why won't ever call me? I can't get this to happen. It's a rub in the face, unintentional on your part or my part. Because when you said me initially, I was like, oh, I love that. That's great. I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
My blind spot. I should have been like, that may come across.
In fairness, Bill did say 4 white guys, and I thought, okay, all right. But I thought,
yeah, and is Bill really a white guy, or is he's like own species in some ways, and that's a joke. But so I understood kind of both sides.
Yeah.
I really, really do. But we're at a time when people are trying to find their voice, and they're being pushy. Or not pushy is the wrong word. They're being appropriately aggressive, appropriately aggressive, pushy. They sound violent. Courageous. They're stepping up. They're speaking for themselves more, and I think that's a really good thing.
Debate's fine if you take out cancel culture. Like, sure, talk about it. Like, let's not scream.
Right. Although I will say sometimes there are people who I know in the industry who feel like they have to scream to be heard because they are not being heard. Yeah. Minorities quite often, if they don't get a little loud.
An interesting one. So the Bill Berman bus, as Chad and Cheese called it, then called out the podcasters and said, well, like, okay, so why are you not being more diverse in your guests? And I've just played you that clip from Chad and Cheese. And the essence of it is they're saying it's really tough to go out there and source new voices all the time. And men like pitch podcasters all the time to come on the show, especially a successful show like theirs. What's your opinion on that? Should like the media creators actually be going out to source and making sure they're, I don't know, more diverse in the voices that they're putting out there, or like how do we fix that?
No, it's a good question. I can speak for myself. So right now, what I do is I run a recruiting news site, Recruiting News Network. There's my pitch, and we do interviews with leaders, right? Product makers, leaders in the corporate side, and I really try and find non-white males for this year. Now there are a mix. Obviously, it's just the way the industry is. But I do try and source people who are diverse, but it does take more time. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. I think, frankly, is that people who have been raised, minorities, women, in a society where their voice is not heard as easily, get a bit gun shy about speaking up. And that's tied into, and I'll do a quick recruiting point here too. That's reflected in job descriptions. There's been some data research done around job descriptions. The longer they are, the more requirements they have, frankly, the less likely that minorities and women will apply. And Harvard did this research a couple of years ago. And the reason behind it is that, I think it was Harvard, at least Harvard, HBR published it. The reason is because women especially second guess themselves because of the way they're raised. So if you have 10 requirements and you're looking for an astrophysicist who can speak Latin, knows how to juggle, and the last one is good with people. If I saw that, I'm not an astrophysicist. I took Latin back in high school. I cannot juggle, but I'm good with people. So I'll apply because, hey, I'm good with people. No problem. I'll give it a shot. A woman will see all those, and maybe the last one is good with people. She's kind of shy and nervous. She said, well, I'm not good with people, but she went to MIT. She's PhD. She juggled for Ringling Brothers. She teaches Latin, but she won't apply because that last bullet. If they don't meet every single bullet, they typically won't apply. So, and that speaks to this reticence, but people who are raised to think they're not as worthy, not as strong, versus guy like me who's sort of raised like you're a white guy, you can do whatever you want. North America white guy, I'll do whatever. I'll try anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm not afraid of the rejection because it's not as common for me to get it. So that may be why it's harder to get minorities and women to speak.
Yeah.
And there's also some bias, and we have to be, I think, be fair too. There's probably bias among the selectors too. We have our blind spots, and if someone's not aggressive enough pitching us, or or we have our own little bias around their race, their gender, we might, without realizing it, skip them over for whatever reason. So it's a matter of both, I think, both directions, and that's part of the problem. I think we have to find alignment.
Yeah, and
Makes sense at all, or I'm babbling, but
it definitely does. I suppose the bit that's tricky, and just for the record, we have a 50-50 split between men and women on the people we've lined up, but we actively went and targeted it. And I know when the show builds up like the other one did, it'll be all dudes pitching us, and because that's just what happens.
sure. Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, but should you sacrifice the quality of a show in the name of equality or bias? Like, if you're just taking on somebody with a different gender or a different, to get that quality of the show right, does the show come first, or does the equality come first?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't think you need to sacrifice the quality. I think it'll take a bit more work to get the diverse speakers.
Yeah.
So it's more effort on our end, yours and mine,
Yeah.
to really track them down and encourage them. Because there's I think there's an equal number of qualified people of all genders, races, orientation, and everything else. But you're gonna get, it'll be easier to get the white men because we're gonna come after you. So hey, can I be in your show? So it's more effort on your part, frankly, to get it moving. But I do think once you kind of seed the clouds enough, you'll get more people to diverse approaching you, and then it becomes cyclical, but it takes some more effort to get it moving. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It's good. It's a good point. So let's move on to the technology side.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about what you do for a living now. You're like the other guys. Do you sit somewhere between the media and the product and advisory, or are you just?
Yeah, I'm more in the media space now, so it's been kind of an evolution. So look, as I said, I started staffing, then went corporate with the ZoomInfo thing. The ZoomInfo got me hands on product a little bit, which was interesting. And I'm a bit of a tech geek anyways. I like machines. So I got working a bit with that, and then spent about 3 years after rolled out ZoomInfo with my own kind of consulting company, doing a bunch of stuff. And then went back in corporate again. But then I wound up, my last corporate gig was at PwC, the Big Four accounting firm, where I was their senior manager or director, whatever I was, of technology, looking at their recruitment technology stack and their ecosystem. And that got me deep into the vendor space because I was talking to a lot of vendors. We're rebuilding stuff. And PwC's got a great consulting group, so I was working with them too. So I got a lot of flavors in that role. And when I left there, because I really wanted to get back into consulting on my own, because I found it fascinating, I went to HireClicks, which was at the time, still is, an agency of record, and my favorite agency of record on the planet. I've been their client twice already, thought highly of them. They wanted to build a consulting group out to advise clients on technology acquisition, implementation, building their ecosystem, their process, their brand, bunch of stuff. So I helped kick that off, and we built a team. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I like building things and doing things. So a little over a year ago, HireClick's founder approached me and said, "Listen, let's talk about doing a news service. I've always wanted to, and he always would want to. I did too. I'm a writer, among other things, and." He had this URL he bought 10 years ago. I've been maintaining it, called Recruiting News Network, and said, let's build a news server. Let's try and do something that's a little more about the news and long form journalism. So it's a mixture of pieces. So it's advice, it's what's happening where, what's going on, but also what's happening with the labor markets, things like that. That was the idea. So we kicked that off, and over the last 12 months, as it's gotten more successful and bigger and more audience, and we're moving into selling advertising and bringing in more writers, I've gotten more engaged with it. So I've slowly been pulling away from the advisory part at HireClicks, which is still its own group, but if you need advisory services from recruiting, I recommend them. They're a phenomenal group of people. My role now is more kind of reporting, observing. I do some, like I offer free advice on what to look at technology. That's why I run Talent Product Plays, to be in there, be part of that mix. I do occasional one-off projects for our clients who are looking for mostly help with their writing. So job descriptions, career site copy, pieces like that. And then I'm also an internal resource for anyone in the company who, if a client says, hey, I'm looking for, like yesterday, someone asked me, one of my colleagues, hey, one of our clients is looking for any AI powered resume selection tools. What do you recommend? So I gave him 4 off the top of my head. Have him look at these. So I do a bit of that, but it's less pay to play. It's less advisory, more informal. Now I'm more of an observer and a reporter.
You resell it as well?
What's that?
You resell the technology as well?
No, we don't. So when we set up the that group, having been on the corporate side and having gotten advice that I didn't know was the person I was getting advice from was getting paid by a vendor or on the board of a vendor, I got a little upset by that when I found out after the fact, hey, you told me to buy this, but you're on the board, or who told me to buy this, but you're a reseller for them. I wanted the advice to be very clean. So our main rule was we don't take commissions from vendors for resell. There's no reselling. The client pays us for advice and technology.
Okay.
If they're paying us for advice, then we're not going to take any money from vendors in that process whatsoever. Now, if a client on the ad side says, hey, who do you like? And we have a relationship for the advertising and whatnot, then that's maybe a little different. But when it comes to actual advisory services, we want to keep it very clean. There's no money changing hands in the back.
The only clean advisor in the world. Well done.
But the thing is, our clients really appreciate that. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's shocking to them. They get better advice, I think.
Yeah.
And they get better service too.
How does that? So if I've got a product, it's going to change the world. It's going to make everything equal and fair. And, I'm really excited about it. Martin, help me out. Will you recommend it? What hoops do they have to jump through before somebody like you gets behind a product?
I mean, we want to look at it. Obviously, you do a demo, walk through it, look at the case studies, do a deep dive, understand who they're targeting, and make sure that we really believe it works, right? That's obvious, kick the tires a bit. And then we'll think about what clients we think, A, are looking for tech like this or might be open to it, and B, are willing to work with the startup and give them advice. So we want to partner the client and the vendor in that level. Especially if you're a startup, listen, this client of ours, they love new tools. They're really good about doing pilots. They'll give you solid advice. We recommend you work with them, and we recommend you give them a trial, give them some chance to get their hands around it for low or no cost, just so that they're working with it, and we help with the process too. And we'll measure it and test it too, and make sure it's all working properly and give feedback too. Then we get some comfort, and then we say, well, we saw it work once, we know it works. Now we tell other clients, hey, listen, we saw this work live in the field. We saw it out in nature and what it can and can't do. We think it'd be good fit for you for these problems you're looking to solve.
Okay, excellent. That's that's kind of probably. On the other side of the business, I have the Recruiter Startup podcast, and out of that, we've built a community. And we've started reselling technology, and we're still working out the different steps involved in it. I think so. It's really interesting to get your take on that. What big issues are there out there that HR tech's trying to solve at the moment?
So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at the moment, the world's a mess. We all know this. It's been a mess for over 12 months now. Hopefully, it's stabilizing, but the crystal ball is cracked. The tools that have really been getting a lot of attention were tools that were not really as highly thought of, frankly, before this. Assessments, which were always important, but now are really important. Digital video interviewing. Some of the block and tackle stuff has become really darlings because they're trying to figure out how to actually engage with people who are not close to you and hire them and assess them. I think the next issue we'll be seeing is that as we start to get through the pandemic, a lot of people have gotten used to working from home. A lot of people actually are moving away from the big urban centers because they can work remotely, it's cheaper. In Italy, for example, there's a phrase now, it's called south working. The northern Italy is industrialized, it's where all the work's happening, but a lot of folks who have second homes in Italy, or they're from small villages in the south, they're all moved south, and they're working remotely from the south. And will they go back north when things finally open up, or will they want to stay there? Hiring managers, a lot of them traditionally wanted folks, in the office working face to face for a lot of reasons. They're not going to use the idea that remote works, and if that maintains, then they'll be more open to hiring folks from all over the place. So it can be globalized assessments, can be globalized video interviewing. Is it just within your own country? And how do you maintain that in terms of infrastructure, in terms of scalability, learning and development, which was really L&D, LMS system in general really needed a kick in the butt for a long time. They weren't well thought out, but they're now becoming part of not just HR in general, but they're actually starting to bleed into to recruiting a bit too, as you're kind of reskilling people, as we're looking at gig workers and how do you train them and get them board quickly. So, and those platforms are scaling up rapidly. They're getting lots of investments, lots of attention. Internal mobility tools are getting huge all of a sudden, because folks, if you have someone who's good, reskill them and then find a new role for them internally, or vice versa. How do you make that happen?
Wow, that is a lot of key issues out there.
Yeah, sorry, I tend to do that. So, and I talk fast, so I apologize.
Well, what's your opinion on, like, could you just jump into one of those subjects, working from home? What about the monitoring software out there on productivity? Like, here a lot of products are like videoing people as they work and stuff. Where do you stand on that?
I'm troubled by that. I am. I understand that it may be important in some industries, maybe finance to an extent, but when you're looking at monitoring people, there's that stigma of being watched by my boss and my employer. It's Big Brother. There's also the simple reality that no one's personal life right now is the same as the person next door to them. We all have different issues with our children, with our families, with just our schedules. Things are kind of a mess. So expecting folks everyone to be in the same box as far as their schedule goes and be mappable consistently is impossible. So people who are productive workers doing great, but maybe they can't work during the day because of childcare issues or whatever, but they work really well from midnight to 5 a.m. or they're just doing strange schedules, but the work's getting done. It's productive, and they're making their meetings. Why are you monitoring them? I think we should monitor the traditional points, monitor output, look at their interactions, their behavior in meetings, things like that. That is normal monitoring, but actually monitoring when they log in and on their machine. If they're in the office, would you be standing in the cubicle all day long watching them, making sure they're not like stopping to play Tetris or I really just dated myself, stopping to play, a video game or whatnot, or just have a snack? You wouldn't be. You assume they're working. You're not going to be watching them all the time.
When a client comes to you and they're like, "Hey Martin, I'm going to scale up. We just got a bag of money. I need a tech stack." Do you have like an out of the box 7 that you go for, or do you have like a 4 in every category? How do you decide? How do you decide what product works with which company?
We don't until we know they're interested in their process. My advice to everyone is never buy technology until you've actually done process mapping and optimized your process, and make sure your process works. Because otherwise you're just buying random stuff, and it could be anything. You might think you need this kind of stack because you've always done things this way, but maybe the way you've been doing things don't work anymore, especially now. Everything's changed. So first up, make sure you've nailed your processes. And that's everything from sourcing to recruiting to onboarding to your brand, all of it, and how it all connects. And then within there, start looking for what places you can optimize. Maybe we don't need these steps. Or this step is very manual. What if we had a tool in place? Then you can start seeing where you actually need technology versus process changes. From there, then you look into tech, and then I can give you a better answer. And then from within that, I've got a number of tools that address all kinds of solutions and issues that I recommend. Like if you're looking to, again, let's look at the resume piece again too. If you're looking at the resume piece, I like these 3 or 4 personally. I think they work really well for your situation, client, with your budget and what you're doing. I recommend these 2 especially. The other versus someone else, I may recommend 2 others in the same kind of group. It's sort of gauged based on who the client is too.
All right. What could you name some companies out there that really get you excited about the future of HR tech? Who's got your attention in the last year, 24 months that you're like, you're jumping out of your seat going, this is a game changer?
That's a good question.
You're the man to ask it to, though.
Yeah, I know. I hate to say nobody. There's it's a fair answer though. It's and part of it simply because everything shifted so much that these new solutions are coming on they're adapting. I like what Paradox is doing quite a bit. Some of their approaches. I think they're smart. Which I think is important and thoughtful. How they spend their money, what they're trying to solve toward. They're not saying AI does everything, but they're looking to be smarter about it. Yeah, I've got a fondness for stories incorporated when it comes to telling a brand story using video. I think video is really powerful, and the way they approach it's smart. Not so much tech; it's more of a blend of things. But I do like what they do. There's a company out of Australia called Vervo, VERVOE. I find them interesting what they're doing. They've got a neat approach to finding kind of hidden gems and being smarter about matching skills to abilities and needs, as opposed to looking simply at a resume and saying yes or yes, no, yes, no. They're small but interesting, I think, and they're going to scale up, I think, as well too. A few others, but no one I'm looking at saying, gosh, they're just blowing everyone away. They're just doing every single thing right. I like Icems for block and tackle ATS, and their onboarding is really good. The way they approach the market's interesting. Greenhouse I like a lot too. Their diversity approach is good, and what they're doing is important work and smart. Who else? I hate because somebody's gonna yell at me for not mentioning their name, right? It's what's going to happen. So I'm getting top of my head.
Curious who comes from the top of your head. And just a final question. Name me some people in the industry that inspire you. Not in the HR world, in the HR tech world, please.
Yeah. So in the tech space.
In the tech.
Yeah, I think by Aaron Maddox from Olivia mentioned, I think he's smart and good, doing some good work. Who's inspiring me? It's funny because so this is weird, but I get inspired by writers, philosophers, weird people like that, musicians. What's that?
Who impresses you then?
Yeah, who impresses me? Again, like I said, Olivia interesting. Yeah, I think Daniel Cohen from Greenhouse, CEO. I think the world of Daniel, frankly, as a person, as a human, and he's impressive and he's smart too, which I think is really important. Yeah, the founders are great people. Two very smart women who I think are looking for the common good. I'm excited to see what the Hennessy's, the founders of Smashfly, are doing. They have a new thing called Grace Blocks. They're a married couple, and they're doing. Actually, the founder of Great People. Funny enough, they're also married. But I think that what they're doing with this new tool they're working on is interesting, because what the reason they impressed me is they're nerds in the best way possible. And they love building tech and tools, and they like dive deep into it. And I think that's great. They're always trying to build. They're trying to build tools that solve problems, not just build something and try and make you buy it. If that makes sense. And I find that impressive.
Yeah. Okay, Martin. So that is us today. But just one last thing before you go.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any advice for any founders out there who are early on their journey in HR tech, what would it be? What would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, try and solve problems for people you love. Don't try and build tech and then sell it to people. And this is advice I got from the founder of Avid Technology. Avid Technology does they're a massive movie film technology company. So Avatar, all the Star Wars films use their tech. They're major. I met the founder years ago. Really, really great human being. And he started Avid because he'd been paralyzed in the car accident and watched a lot of movies. And he wanted to build, an MIT graduate, wanted to build technology for the movie industry because he loved movies. And he wanted to solve problems for people who made movies. And what he wound up with was far different from what he started out with, but he was solving toward the people he loved. He left there and started a tech company, built technology he loved, and tried selling to people, and nobody wanted to buy it. And he said, the advice of Martin: solve problems people you love. Don't fall in love with your technology. Fall in love with your customers, and you'll find the path. And I think that's a great advice. I live by it.
All right. Where can people find you, Martin?
So you can find me. So it's Martin at recruitingnewsnetwork.com. So recruitingnewsnetwork.com. The site's recruitingnewsnetwork.com is our news site. One quick ask, if you are making a job change or have recently reach out to us, we have a session called People on the Move. We want to feature everyone making job changes and what they're doing. It's fun. Just let us know.
Matt Charney got a post about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's everyone from the Matt Charney of the world, folks who are like junior sourcers taking a new role. We want to tell everyone's story. We want to celebrate you as you're in the industry. We want to celebrate you. If you're a leader, especially in the corporate side, and you want to be profiled by us, and I will say, especially diverse, just because I think it's again, we'll get pitched by a lot of white men. You reach out to me. I want to talk with you. I want to feature you and tell your story. And especially if you're not someone who's normally on the stage at events, I want to make your story known, especially if you've been recruiting in COVID last year. You've learned things that need to be shared. So I want to tell your story. And that's my pitch and my ask.
Good on you. And you have your Facebook group as well.
Yes. Oh yeah. And join Talent Product Plays on Facebook. It's a good group. Occasionally we beat people up, but it's with love.
It's all a learning experience. All right. Thanks.
Exactly. Thanks for your time, everyone. Thank you, man.
All right. Welcome back. What did you make of that, Siobhan?
I loved it. I love him. I feel like I could have pints with him. That's how interesting he was. And for an Irish woman to say that, that's a lot. Yeah. And I also like the fact that he backed up the point I had made when we were discussing Frida on the previous podcast about, he said there was a Harvard study, about like women and minorities feel like they have to hit like 100% of a job spec, whereas like the white heterosexual male will like maybe hit 30%, like you do, and just say, sure, look, I'll give it a bash. Whereas
10%, no problem. I'll set up a podcast series. Let's go for it.
Yeah, let's offend everybody. Whereas like someone who is actually qualified, like whether it was a female or in a minority, and it's like a thing that's taught to them from society. So I really like the fact that he backed up my point there. But there were so many great bits. I love the fact that he said as well that you had kicked a hornet's nest with your Facebook post.
I kind of
intentionally.
He said it was unintentional. It was intentionally. Like you want to make a splash when you're making an entrance into a scene. And what I didn't realize was there's obviously a bit of hatred there on the diversity front, but from opportunities of not having the same voices speaking, whether that's black, white, male, female, there seemed to be like, because they were the very dominant voices and lots of other people are competing for the stage, there was lots of stuff coming in back and forth. So it was fun from an observational point of view. I think we might tiptoe around a few subjects in future.
Yeah, no, I think, well, do you know what it is? You're not, and this is the whole thing that we had said about cancel culture, like you're not going to know everything. So not to sound like a snowflake, like it does need to be a safe place for things to grow. And I also thought it was interesting that you had said something about for the guests on your show, like, is it in the interest of diversity, like, do you have to sacrifice quality? Because I know that even for the podcast, The Glass House, like trying to find people, and he made a really good point. It's not that you have to sacrifice the quality. You can have a diverse range of guests and different speakers and different voices. It's just initially we're going to have to try harder to engage with them and encourage them that this is actually like, a safe space. Like you're not going to try and catch them out or anything. Like it's a good spot for them to come in and share their.
And I'm all for that. But you run the risk of tokenism then, like having a token person who always speaks because they're the black person in that community or they're the trans person in that community. And is that getting a new voice out there, a new perspective, or is it just repeating the same story that's been told on every other podcast? So I'm conscious of that.
No, I get that, but then you also have to use that same thought process with the same speakers that you've had with the Highwaymen. So like, are they just not token because they're white?
No,
because they've been speaking the same thing. So for me, like I haven't heard transgender people talking. I was telling you the other day that I'd linked in with the Native American HR Society because I haven't found them. I don't know who their speakers are, but they can recommend people to me to have a conversation and push the envelope. And maybe like what you're doing now with this podcast is that it's not going to be tokenism or having somebody on. It's just amplifying voices that should have been amplified.
Yeah. And look, we're headhunters. So we should be able to search out the best people.
Yeah, we can. It's just hard.
Yeah. And just for anybody listening, we do have a 50-50 ratio at the moment. And I'm probably guessing that's not going to remain, but we'll make a real effort to get different voices and different perspectives out there, but not at the sacrifice of a good story.
No.
And that's the bit we have to work at and not be lazy.
Yeah, well, that's on us though. And I think that that's good that was covered in the podcast. It's also important to remember as well that anybody from a minority group, so whether that's like color, age, all the different areas of diversity, sexual orientation, it's not on them to teach us or the people who are not in a minority. I'm a woman, I'm half Algerian, my dad's an Arab, so I tick a few boxes, but it's not on them to educate the majority on diversity and inclusion. It's up to the people in the majority to be an ally and go out there and kind of search for those voices. And I do think that that's what we're trying to do through Scale and through this podcast. And there will be blips, there will be things that go wrong, but the intention is good. And I think that that's what people have to remember, is that like we are searching for these voices, we are trying to amplify them. We're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but they can't use that as a cudgel to beat us with.
All right, so we have 30 CEOs lined up over the next while, large from all over the world in HR tech, and it's going to be really exciting seeing what the perspectives are. And the one thing that's joining them all together is they're and I don't know if you've seen this in the interviews, is they have a passion to make change in the world. And
yeah, that's the thread, isn't it? It's like this organic idea at the start of it, like just to be, do something good, have a purpose, and then it grows legs, and here they are.
Here they are. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. We will be back very soon with another amazing podcast.